This class is meant to teach you about the environment and agricultural, as well as teach you a lot about what's going on in our own backyard in the Mojave Water Agency service area and across the state as well. So with the short time period, I'm kind of going to go a little bit quicker. So if you guys have questions, speak up or get with me at the end and we can finish it. So why is this water management kind of overall topic that we're talking about important? Well, for one, it's to ensure long-term supplies are available to meet future demands. That means for your kids and your kids' kids and so on and so forth. So we have a thing that every water purveyor, Apple Valley, City of Bay Area, City of Victorville, Liberty Utilities has to do, which is an urban water management plan that projects out 20 years into the future of where their water supply is going to be. So that's a document that has to be done in years ending 5 and 0. So we're coming up on the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, which is going to project how much water you guys use, how much water is coming in, how much it's going to incorporate the last drought. Like I said, it's going to anticipate demands. We get raw numbers from each of those cities to incorporate into our calculation. It anticipates droughts, 1, 3, 5, 8-year droughts. We're going to touch on that in just a minute. And then why is that important? Because for us as a water wholesaler, it helps us balance water supplies and demands. So we don't want to put in 18,000 homes without the proper amount of water, because then we're not going to have enough water for 20 years or for the next century. That's what we're looking for, and that's what this whole class is about, is sustainability. So when we're talking about sustainability, it applies to water supply as well. So part one, we're going to talk about surface water, our inflows to our surface, into our service area. You can see here's our service area. We have what we call gauges. We have 6 gauges that we monitor. West Fork and Deep Creek we'll talk about. Lower Narrows, that's right there as you're going towards Hellendale. One out in Barstow, one out in Afton. Why do we have these gauges? We'll talk about the adjudication in just a minute, but these are bookmark gauges to make sure if water's flowing in from the headwaters, which we'll see here in just a minute, when they go through these gauges, but it doesn't register at this, let's just say the Lower Narrows gauge, from the upper watershed, that means that all the water stayed in the upper watershed. So it makes sense. Here's us. What we do is we also go out there and verify, which is stream gauging. Hopefully you guys will get to do this as environmental scientists. Go out there and you get to put this pygmy meter in the water, and it spins and it counts the beeps, and it'll calculate the flow at certain cross sections of a river, or of a stream. And we're also a cooperator with the USGS. So when we collect data, we post it onto the United States Geological Survey website so that everyone can see it. As we are a public agency, we're all transparent. So that's part one. Part two, we're going to talk about the judgment. And that part three is going to be threats to our imported supplemental water supply. So everyone knows the aqueduct goes into Silverwood Lake through our service area. That's what makes us a state water contractor. We'll go through that here in just a little bit. So when we talk about watershed, what does a watershed mean? Out here in this blue line along the mountains, this is facing north, right? So here's the 15. If you're going down the hill, go to San Bernardino or Victoria Gardens, or north if you're going to Vegas. We're about right here where Bear Valley crosses the river. That's where VVC's at. You can see this huge drainage area. So whenever it rains or storms come up from the San Bernardino area, if rain falls within this area, it's technically within our watershed. So you can see that we have, and there's a reason that we're going to talk about the Forks Dam here in a minute, but there's a reason that dam was built right there, because you can see the two drainage areas comes together at a fork and then goes to the Mojave River. So we have 2 USGS gauges, one on Deep Creek and one on West Fork. One thing I want to point out is if you just draw a north-south line where the dam is at, you can see that the drainage of West Fork is a lot smaller than the drainage of Deep Creek. So when we look at that, you saw the size of just the watershed. So when it rains, we have heavy flows. at that Forks Dam, you know, all the water is headed down towards Victorville and Barstow and downstream users, but approximately 2/3 of that amount of water that's coming in is coming from the Deep Creek area. And you guys saw how much bigger the watershed is. How do we know that? Because of these gauges. So without measurements, without good science, we can't make these projection numbers and everything like that. And then you see 33%, like I said, you saw it's kind of a third and 2/3 on Deep Creek, or a third on West Fork and 2/3 on Deep Creek. Everyone thinks that when it rains really heavy that Silverwood Lake is going to overflow and the dam is going to blow. It only accounts for about 23% of the flows, and you have flows from 2 stream gauges, and then you have ungaged flows. And we could talk for an hour just on Silverwood Lake, but we got to keep moving. So from those 2 forks, you see 2/3 comes from the Deep Creek area based on the watershed size, and 1/3 comes from the West Fork, which is going back West Fork, Deep Creek. So now we'll talk about Cedar Springs Dam, which holds back Silverwood Lake, or is a dam at Silverwood Lake. Here's Cedar Springs Dam. You see the dam with the spillway. Over 40 years, it's been operating DWR. It's a DWR facility. They never had to use a spillway, so they've managed all the floods that's come in, and they've been able to release it and not had to use a spillway, as you guys probably saw at Lake Oroville this past year, where they actually had to use the spillway. A lot of damage happened. That spillway has never been used, and hopefully it never will be. We'll be able to manage the water coming in if we ever get those heavy storms. When they release water, people think that it's going to come over the top of that, but no, there's valves and slide gates underneath here that when you drive on the 173 going past it, you can see water is released from the very bottom of that dam. So now we go to the Forks Dam. So here's the West Fork, and here's a good picture. You have Deep Creek back there. You kind of see a little puddle, and this is all West Fork. And you see Deep Creek coming from this side. The reason they call it Forks Dam or the Mojave River Dam is because there's one fork coming in here, and they meet, and they shoot out one area. This was kind of shown at our last presentation, but I want to show it again. This is the Mojave River Dam is not gated. It just has a culvert that only allows a certain amount of water to flow through it. So when there's just base flow running through it right now, actually Mojave Water Agency is releasing water from Silverwood to recharge areas in the upper Mojave River. If you guys live up in the Sperry area, you probably notice that the river's flowing. So flow is not attenuated, which means it's not stopped or gated or anything like that. But during storms, what happens is if you have a heavy enough flow, it'll actually back up behind the dam. And since it's ungated and there's only a max amount you can put in through there, the maximum flow is about 23,500 cubic feet per second. I did the math, about 32 acre feet per minute flowing through there. So this is a very dramatic drawing because the dam never gets that high, right? Because this dam also has a spillways, which we'll see in just a minute. But our surface water supply is not held back by a gate or anything like that per the adjudication. We cannot dam or impound water because then it won't reach downstream. So it's not fair we'll talk about that during the adjudication. So if you go to Mojave Water, mojavewater.com, we have real-time surface water gauging stations that you can look at, the one I listed. You can also look at the outlet at the Mojave River Dam. And you can see this is actually precipitation along the same time on February 8, 2014 in time. So you can see there's heavy precipitation at that time. And at that time, heavy precipitation, you're going to see a little bit of a lag time when the heavy precipitation rains down and then it starts to run off. So you see both of these. This is flow, right, in CFS, and then water level impounded behind the dam. So you're at and this is above sea level. So you're at 2988, goes up to about 3006. So what's that? That's about 14 feet. But you can see there's a slight runoff, and you can see it peaks and then it slowly trims off because you still have, it was still raining a little bit, but you're always going to see that nice decline. It would shoot up real quick during rain events, and then it'll slowly, because it takes time for stuff to run off. Even through soils, it'll go through soils and then come out, and then it'll run off. So this is actually at the Mojave River Dam. So this is both Deep Creek and West Fork coming in. And you guys can view this on our website 24 hours a day, when it's raining, when it's not raining. Right now it's dry because there's no storm events, but during storm events, this is vital to us because not only do environmental scientists like myself look at it, but police, fire, flood control, everything from here all the way to Newberry Springs are looking at this and saying, is it still rising? Is it still rising? When is this gonna, when is the crest gonna, when is the peak gonna crest? And when are we on now the downturn, the negative slope of this graph? So, and there's certain action levels that certain organizations get called. So it's important to know that this data that we host makes decisions for closing down roads, such as Rock Springs across the river, if you guys have ever encountered that. Like I said, all these are available on our website, just Mojave Water, Regional Surface Water, and you can go there and check it out. Even Silverwood Lake's elevation and what they're discharging. So it's actually pretty cool. If you click on Silverwood Lake, it'll show you during a rain event how much water is actually flowing out, and you can say, wow, there's 1,200 CFS flowing out right now. That's pretty cool. So it gives you, it makes you more informed as an environmental scientist if you have all this data, and it's required for like what I mentioned earlier, the urban water management plan, to look at all that. So our native water supply is largely based on long-term hydrograph. A couple sections ago, I mentioned that we have dry years, we have droughts. This is what's coming out of the Deep Creek and West Fork gauges going in combined. So at a 60-year base period, annually about 65,000 acre feet. And for those online who don't know what an acre foot is, it's 1 acre of land, 1 feet deep, 1 foot high in water. So you're gonna 1 acre of land, 1 feet deep in water. It's about 326,000 gallons. You can see this is discharge in acre feet per thousands. You can see that sometimes we go low, we barely get any, but we shoot right back up, and we go low, we shoot back up. Go low, shoot back up. And those are those kind of the cyclical drought cycles that we're going through, like we just went through one. But you can tell, like here's 70, what's that? In the 70s, you had a couple big spikes, and then you really didn't have anything for a while. Another big one. So those are the ones that, like I said, that really get water down Newberry Springs, really recharge the aquifers down there. So, yeah. So part 2, groundwater management and the changing paradigm, basically, and we're going to get into it right now. Local groundwater management at the state. We kind of talked about this, but there's articles about articles, and this was when the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was being enacted, that people are just over-pumping groundwater. And these are, articles from Chico up north. It's not just a Southern California thing. Here we are on the coast, solutions for groundwater crisis, because people are just pumping groundwater like crazy and no one's overseeing that. And we have a couple other examples. Here's down in Coachella Valley, defend efforts to combat declines in water aquifers. Balance applies with use. So if you guys noticed during the last drought, you guys saw the signs, reduce your usage by this percentage. Well, that's reason because groundwater levels were dropping during that drought period, and we want to make sure that we have a sustainable amount of water. And now with that drought has enacted a lot of different pieces of legislation, which we're going to talk about right now. And there's actually no state level entity overseeing groundwater at that time. Now there is, but this was a big thing back in 2013. And they even said it, the Modesto B. There's going to be someone that come in and manage the groundwater across the state. So when a basin is at permanent risk of damage and after being provided the needed authority, local agencies do not make significant progress to correct the problem in a timely manner, the state should have carefully defined authority to protect the basin and its users until an adequate local program is established. No one wants the state to come in and manage your water supply. No one wants that. That's them basically saying, look, if you're not going to do the job, the state's going to come in and do the job for you. So what happened was they passed. Oh, here I want to show you. Yeah. So we have that, and maybe this is premature, but yeah, I'll go back to that slide. So what happened is we passed all these bills, and one of the main things that came out of this was the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Commits California to sustainable groundwater management. As you know, Mojave Water Agency is the groundwater management entity in the area. That's why we're going to talk about the adjudication next. They want to manage the basins at a local level using best available technologies / science, but it does not alter or determine surface water rights or groundwater rights under common law. So it doesn't change if we're an adjudicated basin, so it's a little different. But if we weren't, it doesn't change your water rights or your surface water rights or determine that. Okay, so the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act identifies a lot of things. Some key things: groundwater resources are mostly affected at the local or regional level. We are a regional wholesaler, and we recharge all. We have 2 pipelines that trail the Mojave River and go out to Yucca Valley. So we are in charge of making sure there's enough water where people are to effectively manage. Data reporting is necessary to support sustainable groundwater management. That is something where water levels come into play. You guys all, I hope most of you guys, well, maybe most of you guys weren't here, but on the field trip, but I showed you guys what we do. We're in our big mass run right now where we're out collecting water levels from 450 wells right now. So that data is important. And like I said, making decisions based off of data is always going to be better than a hunch. You can't make decisions off of a hunch or what you think is going to happen. And the other driving factor, if a local groundwater management agency is not managing its groundwater sustainability, the state will protect the resource. It means if we're just going to sit here and pump and grow all this food and all these nuts, then the state's going to come in and say, no, you can't do that. Luckily, we have an adjudication, and let's see. So we go specifies use for Bulletin 118, defines basins and subbasins. Let's go back a couple because I think I misplaced that slide. Here's DWR Bulletin 118 basins. In orange, they prioritize basins by color. Orange is high. So Central Valley, we've all heard about the subsidence. I've talked about it. That's all going to be very high. We're down here, right next to that yellow piece. That's the Sheep Creek fan over in Wrightwood. If we're right in that orange area. So we are in a high priority basin. So we have to monitor our groundwater. We have to report to the state entity. But you can see it's not just us, it's the entire state. So that's what SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, enacted. So you can see, green is low and the other light blue is very low. And you can see for green, there's not really much going on out here, but you can see here's the Owens Valley, if you guys ever been up to Mammoth or Bishop, along with Los Angeles, going over to Santa Barbara, and a little bit further up north. So that's Bulletin 118 CASGEM basins and their prioritization. So let's go back. So that specifies its use. It requires them to prioritize. So that was part of SGMA. SGMA is the slang term for Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. It requires adoption of a groundwater sustainability agency. So that has to be formed unless you're an adjudicated basin. But I want to tell you guys this anyways. An agency, if we're not an adjudicated basin, and also it requires you to come up with a groundwater sustainability plan. So the agency will form a plan and work with others to make sure that the groundwater that is being pumped and used is not being overpumped. Or the local agency shows that it's being managed sustainability, which would be the GSA, the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Since we have we're legally adjudicated, we get a little bit of a pass, but I think in 2022 or 2024, we're going to have to come up with an actual plan as well. So it just buys us time. But first, a little bit on the background of why we have an adjudication. This was filed in 1996. City of Barstow sued City of Adelanto et al. Plus all upstream users because Barstow felt like it wasn't getting enough water and they were pumping too much up here in the upper basins and not enough was getting down to Barstow. So that's kind of what started this whole adjudication process, which is administered by one of our departments at Mojave Water Agency, the Water Master Department. I know it sounds kind of weird, the Water Master Department, but it is their main job is to make sure that this adjudication, this judgment, is enacted, and we use water levels and science to make sure that basins are in safe yield, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. So the MWA boards also serves as the Mojave Water Agency Water Master, or Mojave Basin Area Water Master. So we have our regular board, 7 board members. They also act as our Water Master board as well. Their job is to implement the Mojave Basin Area Judgment, and simply put, like I said, they're court-appointed contract administrators. That judgment is a contract. And their job is to implement that contract and to track usage, report it to the court, get data that we collect like hydrographs and stuff like that, and say, is the basin in decline because people are pumping, or is it going up? And they report that to the court. So here are the 5 unique subareas. We have the Alto Basin right here. We have the transition zone, which is right here. We have Oeste, kind of over in Phelan Pinion Hills. We have the Centro Subbasin, which is Barstow all the way up to Harper Lake. And then we have the Baja Basin. So when I say we couldn't dam or impound water behind, like let's just say we put gates on the Mojave River Dam, if we did that and slowly trickle the water out so this upper basin is healthy, water is not getting down the Baja to replenish that groundwater supply. So that's why in the judgment it says we cannot impound water. Now behind the Forks Dam, that was pre-adjudication, so that was all meant for public safety. So that 23,000 CFS coming out of that Forks Dam is strictly for public safety. But important things to note too, these are kind of set by geological faults. See this fault, this Hellendoe fault. If you were on the field trip, I kind of showed you where that was and where it ran up. The well we were measuring was right in Este, about right there. And we were just off the fault. We were talking about different water levels on one side of the fault and one on the other side. As well as Centro, you can see here's the Harper Lake. Harper Lake is up here, and Harper Lake fault runs right about there. So you can kind of see they're kind of bounded by these, at least the transition zone moving into, on the river, moving into the Centro subbasin, and then from the Centro into Baja, they're bounded by faults. So on the upstream side of the fault, the water level will always be higher than the downstream side. So because they act as like an underground dam. And Matt, I find if you were on the trip, he had really good explanation for that. And I wish I could get into that now, but I think we're good. If we had more time, we could talk about it. So before the adjudication, the use was up. Everyone was just pumping water. No one said anything about it. Everyone could just drill the wells, put pumps in them, start pumping water out. After the adjudication, what happened is we determined what's the safe yield of our basins, meaning what's flowing in on using our data that we've collected for many years and invested in. What's the safe yield of our basin? Meaning how much can we pump out and the water levels aren't dropping based on seasonal fluctuations. So yes, we'll see seasonal fluctuations that you'll see in a hydrograph here in just a minute, but what's the safe yield? And then what they did was they tied the safe yield of the basin to adjudicated rights. So let's just say I'm a pistachio farmer out in Newberry, and I was using X amount of water for a while, for 5 years, the base period that they used, and then the adjudication kicked in, and now I'm at the safe yield. Now I have an adjudicated right to that water. Initially, they did a 5-year ramp down after the adjudication was kicked in of 20% over 5 years, so that we could initially get all the basins down to 80%. So if you think, well, I'm not really explaining this real well, excuse me. So you have the adjudication, everyone's pumping, then based off of our science, we determine what the safe yield is, and whoever's pumping, they would go back 5 years before the adjudication kicked in, and they would say, how much water are you pumping? And then that would give you an adjudicated right. So from the use to what your adjudicated right is, there's a big difference. So what do you do? What do you do after that use after judgment? So your use is still high because I'm still growing pistachios and I still need that much water. What happens now is that difference, which is between the adjudicated right and the use after judgment, is now you would have to pay a replacement obligation, which is where the State Water Project comes in, which is why we have 2 pipelines going along the Mojave River and one going out to Yucca Valley. So you would have to pay a replacement obligation based on how much water you use above your adjudicated right. So after the judgment, like I said, you can use up to that much water. If you use over that much, that's fine, but you're going to pay imported water. You're going to pay a fee to supply imported water to that basin so that basin maintains its safe yield. The whole idea is to maintain the safe yield of the basin. So, like I said, importing water, what does that mean? We're a state water contractor, Mojave Water Agency is, and this is the county of San Bernardino in red, and we are that big blue blob right there. It's about 4,900 square miles, and we have rights to the surface water, rights to the State Water Project water, the aqueduct that you guys see, that flows through our service area from East Antelope, East Kern, into our service area, and then out into Silverwood. So let's put all this together and wrap it up and really see what this means. So right now we have, here's VVC, here's your guys' homes. We have extraction wells that are pumping water to your home, right over here. We have wells extracting wells in the aquifer. And we have natural recharge coming off, refilling this aquifer. And we also have homes on wells as well. We have imported water supply coming in and recharging artificially, like we're doing right now with Silverwood. During dry periods, in storage declines, you're going to see the aquifer drop as less water would come in during the drought. You saw the peaks in the graphs over that 60-year period. It goes down. So there'll still be a little bit of base flow. We still have rights to State Water Project, and that depends on the snowpack up north and how much rain they got. So yeah, there was a year where we weren't allowed to have that much water from the State Water Project, but we used as much as we could, and that also flows into the ground and as artificial recharge. But everyone's still pumping water to feed their homes and their fields and everything like that. During periods where it's raining and snowing in our mountains, we have natural recharge coming in, and we also have the supply of the aqueduct. So, like I said, it's kind of a natural process. You see the water levels are going to go up and down. You're going to see that, that your allotment of the State Water Project water will vary by year. You can see that, and I think we're going to get to that here soon. So, but remember, one of our main sources of water, which is our natural supply. So here's a bucket. If we were talking about our supply coming into our basin, we have our natural supply, which is here's the Mojave River Dam, just as from a higher up view. Here's Deep Creek, and here's West Fork. Here's the outlet. So that's where, if it rains in the San Bernardino Mountains, like on the slide before, rains up here, that's where that's coming from. And then we have our imported supply from our State Water Project. So this is in somewhat of a flux right now, and I have some cool stuff to show you here. This is up to 2002. Long-term average, which is basically, we have an allotment of the State Water Project, which is approximately 85,000 acre feet per year that we could take from the California State Water Project, which is the aqueduct. And I refer to it as the aqueduct just because I work at Mojave, but it's the State Water Project. So we have an allotment to that. Each year they based on snowpack, rain, conditions up north, and along with fish restrictions, environmentalists, a bunch of other conditions. This is not always going to be 100%. You can see going back, it's got up to 80%, but it's really not. It varies in between, 10 and 80%. So the long-term average up to 2002 was 61%. So take our 85,000 acre feet per year that we're allotted, and then multiply it by 0.5 or 0.6, which is 60% of that. That's what we are allowed to buy that year from the state water project. And you can see here in 1976, we were only at 8 or 9%. So it varies. So like I said, we have two pipelines. Here's the California Aqueduct that's going into this Lake Silverwood. Then you have the orange dots are recharge areas. Let me go back. Yeah, you can see our recharge. We have one that tails the Mojave River that goes all the way out to Newberry Springs. The orange sites are recharge sites. So there's Newberry Springs recharge. There's Daggett recharge. There's Linwood. There's Hodge. And then we have Deep Creek, which you guys have probably seen if you. Oh, yeah. If you guys live up here, you've seen the water being released. And then the other pipeline goes all the way to Yucca Valley, where we've recharged water as well. And here's in Hesperia. These are recent pictures, and I'm sure, like I said, if you guys live in that area, or hiked or like driving, you've seen it. So what we're doing is mimicking nature. During dry years, we can take that water and recharge it using conjunctive use into our aquifer and mimic nature during times of drought. So we have imported supply, which you guys saw. We have natural supply. Then we have our bucket going out, our water for homes, business, and agriculture. So I know up here in the Alto Basin, it's a lot of homes and businesses, commercial and industrial. As you move down the Mojave River, especially when you get in the Centro and Baja, there are a lot of crops. People do grow alfalfa. They grow pistachios. In Este, there's a huge outcropping of jujubes. I don't know if you guys have heard of jujubes before, but they're like a fruit. But they're a high value crop. That's why they're growing them. So during dry times, when our supply is low and our imported supply is low, our water table goes down. But we manage our basin like a reservoir. So when the natural supply is low, we can import water from the State Water Project or buy water from the State Water Project to import or to mimic what the natural supply would be. Obviously, when the natural supply during those real high years that we saw, we wouldn't have to rely so much on the imported supply, and we're able to use and market that with other contractors that need it. But that's our operational range in our aquifer. So, and in our water master, the point, all their job is just to basically implement the judgment. They have to come up with graphs about what's the net change in storage. This is for the Alto Subbasin, so this is up here. This is through water years 1996 through 2014. You can see that here's the storage and the operational range. You can see it go down, and you see it dry, and then you have a range. When 2004, 2005, there were major storms that hit, so it came right back up. And then it was okay for a little bit, and then we had 2010, which shot it way up. And now we've slowly been trickling down, and this was made during kind of the beginning and mid drought, and it's been updated since. But now you'll see a little bit of an uptick. It's not going to be as much as 2010 or 2005, but it's still going to be an uptick. So any water that's flowing into our service area is always good. And how do we know that? Water levels give us a great indicator. Like I said, we have teams out right now that are measuring water levels. Here's a hydrograph of the well just right across the way that I've talked about too many times in this class. But you get to see the seasonal fluctuations, and you get to see that historical lows and historical highs. But you get to see that it's a cyclical pattern. So droughts come and go, and there's also rains come and go as well. So the primary consensus of what new science is coming out with is that that we're going to have higher highs, which means when it rains, it's just going to pour and dump a bunch of water, and we're going to have lower lows. So when droughts happen, they're going to be more intense, longer, and we're going to need to be prepared for them. But this gives you a good hydrograph. This is what we piece together when we go out and take that measurement. If you're on the field trip, that's just one point. These are thousands of points that a person has gone out there and measured it. This goes back to 1994. So, a 20-year period of monitoring wells. So we have that data to make good science-based decisions. So part 3, State Water Project. What's the reliability of the State Water Project? That's one thing that has been going down. The long-term average of the State Water Project reliability. And what I mean by that is we showed a 61% average up to 2002. Well, now with droughts and climate change and fish restrictions, it's going down. And in 2013, it was right around under 60%. The future, what is it going to be? And we're doing things about this, and this is being proactive in the state. What are the major stresses on it, though? We have fish species. You guys have all heard about the fish getting sucked into the pumps at the Delta to pump in the State Water Project. We want to stop that. We have sea level rise that's happening. We have seismic issues that are happening in the Delta. Because the rivers flow into the Delta, which is connected to the ocean, but it's not so much salt water. It's not even brackish water. It's fresh water before it makes its way out to the bay. But they're controlled by levees, and these levees sometimes break. And if there's earthquakes, they can break, and you can see cars here and there. That's a lot of water to hold back. This little dike right here, that's a lot of water to hold back just for that amount of water. And then the water supply reliability. I mean, everyone kind of saw the pictures of the drought. Then this last drought, it was all over the news. All the reservoirs were dry. Now they were, after this last winter up north, they were all overflowing. So that's that high and that low that I'm talking about. We really bad 5-year drought, and then we got a really good rainstorm up north. So that's the general consensus. It's not coming from me. That's coming from scientists from Harvard and Stanford and stuff like that put on podcasts and stuff that we listen to at Mojave. So is there a solution? Yes. The latest solution that they have is the California water fix. Right now, what they do is the San Joaquin rivers, there's rivers that flow from up north, and they flow into the Delta, and one flows up here, or it flows from the south up. And what happens is we pull these deltas. You can see these channels. This is when you saw that dike break. That's one of these channels. And what happens is this river water makes it through the Delta and makes it down to where the State Water Project's pumps are. So instead of making the water go through this Delta, and you have crops and fields there where people are watering their agricultural fields from the Delta, instead of having the water get put up on the land, then having it run off, which is causing issues for people who take that water, treat it, and serve it to people. What the plan is to create. Have you guys heard about California Water Fix? It's a series of 2 tunnels that are underground that will go underneath the Delta into the forebay. That's the forebay for the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project pumps. So, but however, that's not without conflict. With any type of project this big, I mean, this is a huge project. I know I have numbers in here, but if you've ever driven through the Central Valley and you see that it's just green, if you guys ever going to Tehachapi's, going towards Bakersfield, it is just lush green. And you see these signs: no water, no jobs. The new Dust Bowl created by Congress. There's always, save the Delta, stop the tunnels. There's always going to be people who are pro and against the California Water Fix, and that's a new term that they have now. And you see these, rallies where it's basically water equals jobs, and there's a lot of angst between the two. Build the tunnel, kill the Delta. There's already problems right now that we have with the State Water Project going through the Delta and pumping the water through the Delta, which is fish, the dikes. We have if there's a huge earthquake, a lot of people don't know that it's actually below sea level. So the tunnels make sense, but you're going to have to do a lot of uprooting of land to build those tunnels. So what are we talking about in cost for these tunnels? Approximately for cost, you're talking about $20 billion to build this, and they're approximately, the last I heard was 2 40-foot pipes underneath ground. I think it was 60 or 80 feet below the surface, that would transmit water. Oh, I just lost my PowerPoint. Okay. You have the capital, which is, if you guys have taken economics or accounting, capital is just how much is it going to cost for the pipes and pumps. there's always going to be operations and maintenance, just like your guys' house. You guys have an air conditioner, but you're going to have to buy a filter for it so that when the AC kicks on, the dust doesn't get sucked up into the AC. It's always going to be O&M. So just for the conveyance and construction, about $16 billion. And that's, that's no small feat. And who does this directly affect? This affects the 27 other state water contractors, including Mojave. So that includes monitoring research because it's in a biologically sensitive area. It's not in, every area is biologically sensitive. We've learned that in this class. You have habitat restoration, $4.4 billion. We're talking about billions of dollars. I mean, that's no small feat. We just passed Prop 1, and that was $7 billion, and that was the largest prop that we've passed for water, I think, in California's history. And a lot of those bonds still have yet to be sold. They passed $7 billion, but then they have to sell bonds to people to actually receive that money. If that makes sense. So what are the funding sources? State water contractors pick up about $17 billion of that. So how is that spread across all the state water contractors? It's spread across about what your table A is. Remember I talked about the 85,000 acre feet per year that we have of table A or our allotment for our state water project? It's all based on that. And we have a certain share, a certain number, and these numbers they're not solid numbers. You can see the little squiggly line, that means approximate, but we pick up a large portion of it. Some of it's federal because it will help the CVP is the Central Valley Project, is a federal project. So the federal will pick up some of the cost and the state will kick in a little bit of money, but a lot of it is gonna land on the state water contractors, which is us. And then where does that get passed on to? The consumers. So at Mojave, we're kind of thinking, we're coming up with creative strategies on how to deal with this. I mean, this is granted, we're not asking, or they're not asking us to pay $14 billion, but what if they're asking $600 million? That's a lot of money. That's not even $1 billion. So $600 million, I mean, we're going to have to issue bonds for that and get financing for that, or come up with creative solutions. So when we look at the water field, and I think that's the next major state policies ahead. They kind of voted on it, and the major players had said yes. Metropolitan. I'm not too sure about Kern, but if Metropolitan drives most of it because they have the highest table A, and they voted yes. But what I wanted to get down to is you guys see a lot of this where it's biology, it's every science you can think of, including accounting and finance and everything. That all gets wrapped up in the state water project and the state water contractors. So, and O&M, operators, engineers. I mean, you can list all these, and I can say we have all these at our agency. We have IT, we have public information, we have project managers, we have chemists, we have geologists and engineers, we have operators, technicians, mechanics, data analysts. So there's something, and this is kind of an overarching view that, just because you're doing something in welding doesn't mean that you can't work in water. Water involves all of these traits. Accountants, I mean, a lot of it's money driven, health and safety, administration, all these things. What do we do with all that data we collect? We have a data manager that manages all that data. So it's not just when we say environmental scientists, yeah, we look at the environment, but it encompasses every single major that you have here: finance, human resources. So it's a huge industry. So I encourage you guys to look into the water industry as you pursue your career. If you're like, this is just a class I'm taking to fill a void, I understand, but know that there's something for almost every major out there. And like I said, those with the diverse set skills and the abilities to integrate will thrive. So those be able to, mix and match and think outside the box and come up with these creative solutions. Like you guys have seen, I've seen in my class, the discussion boards and the expanded definitions, you guys are doing a good job. I can see it. And I remember when I was in college, I was like, wow, I don't remember a class teaching me about biodiversity and stuff like that. So this class is really teaching you guys how to integrate all these different items and really think of the issues holistically. So with that, do you guys have any questions? I finished like 2 minutes early. That's good. No?
That's
Huh?
good.
I made it through the PowerPoint. Yeah, it's 46 minutes. So, is AAE still online? Do you guys have any questions?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think we're good. Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Well, I know Mr. Refine will say. Well, I know Neville said he was going to send you the PowerPoint. So, if you want to look it over or share it with your class, he'll send that over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.